Hey everybody, welcome back to Chipstock Investor. I'm Casey.
And I'm Nick.
Somebody recently said that it looks like we're sitting in airline seats, and I feel like that's super appropriate for today's subject, Rocket Lab.
Let's do an update on Rocket Lab. It's been a couple months, and we promised another follow-up after Q1 2025, which recently just happened. So here we go.
2 months ago, Nick, you did a blog post and deep dive on Rocket Lab, and it got, I think, tens of views.
Yep, just tens of views is
Yeah,
correct.
tens,
Not tens of thousands.
just tens. And so we decided, because we're not very good marketers, to do this in video form. And I think it'll probably get hundreds of views.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. This is what you talked about in that blog post that we're going to update today after they had their most recent quarterly report. What is the space economy? What does Rocket Lab do? What should investors be concerned about most? And would we consider buying Rocket Lab and adding it to our portfolio?
Like every industry, the space economy has this supply chain, and the modern space economy owes its existence in no small part thanks to the advance of computing technology, higher computing power, and all of those little chips and components that can make the very arduous journey to space and then weather the radiation and the extreme environment out there. This is why we're covering this on Chipstock Investor. And we're no stranger to space stocks. We've invested in them in the past and done all right doing so. Check out the blog post Casey mentioned. Anyways, Rocket Lab is building this vertically integrated hardware plus software business. And we like that kind of business here at Chipstock Investor. Make sure you check out Semiconductor Insider through May 15th. We're still running that market meltdown sale, 25% off an annual membership. We'll have more to say about Rocket Lab and the space economy over on our Discord server. Check it out.
We're going to first show you a chart with some KPIs for Rocket Lab that we got from our friends at FinChat, the sponsor of today's video. FinChat has all sorts of KPIs or key performance indicators for thousands of companies, helps you understand exactly where the company is getting their revenue from, like this one from Rocket Labs, launch services versus space systems revenue. You can get 15% off any paid plan with the link on the screen or in the video description at finchat.io/CSI. You can make cool charts like this one right here and get 15% off while you're at it. finchat.io/CSI.
This shows you where Rocket Labs gets its revenue. And in recent years, of course, a lot of that is coming from lots of growth in the space systems segment. So Rocket Lab doesn't just launch satellites into space for customers. That's the gray portion of this bar chart. They actually design and manufacture everything from components to full-blown vehicles that make it into space.
This is a beautiful graphic made by Rocket Lab. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about where this business model is headed.
Okay, so similar to our hierarchy of the economy, or in this case, hierarchy of the space industry chart, Rocket Lab is vertically integrated. So a lot of the revenue currently coming from the components and the vehicles that they design and make for their customers. The infrastructure layer is the actual launch services where they got their start. But in the future, they want to develop an actual end service, end market service, like Elon Musk's SpaceX has the Starlink service, the satellite-based internet service. So we don't have a timeline on when that will happen, but obviously this is something Rocket Lab could do. They are in the midst of designing right now because they make the vehicles, they have the launch services. All they would need to do is launch the satellites into space, and then voila, you have internet service that you can offer customers. So pretty cool stuff here. We like this type of business that has this type of vertically integrated optionality.
I remember in the blog, Nick, you mentioned that they were acquiring this company, Minaric. Why is this an important addition to Rocket Lab?
Management discusses two reasons. First, they don't have any presence in Europe yet, and this company that they're in process of acquiring would get them a foothold in Germany. And we showed you a couple of graphics a couple months ago, if you read the blog, about how big the space economy is in Europe. And surprise, especially I think to North Americans, Europe actually has a pretty robust space economy. So that's reason number one. And then reason number two is this company, Minaric, makes important parts and pieces for satellites, laser-based communications. This is another thing we talk a lot about over on Semi Insider recently. Photonics and optics, satellite to satellite communication can't happen the same way it does in terrestrial networks. You have to use light for those satellites to communicate with each other and to create some sort of communications network. So this is a missing link in Rocket Lab's infrastructure and a missing link in their components and what they can offer customers. And obviously, this is something that they more than likely would want to make use of themselves as they design their future satellite constellation for customer internet connectivity, communications, and such. We'll monitor the progress of that acquisition and update accordingly.
Here's the review of their revenue and their gross margin. In Q1 2025, that's the bar on the right. In black, you have their space systems revenue, around 87 million, and then the launch revenue coming in closer to 36 million. That revenue increase is up 32% year over year, and that's primarily driven by the increase in launches from 4 to 5. And one metric that we want to key in on is their GAAP gross margin. In Q1 2024 last year, it came in just around 26%. And then in Q1 2025, the gross margin climbed up to nearly 29%.
And we'll show you the guidance for Q2 where there's expected to be yet another increase in the gross margin. But this is another area that I think is a proof of concept for this business. If you look at some of the legacy aerospace and defense companies, excluding Boeing right now for obvious reasons, think like Northrop Grumman, L3 Harris Technology, Lockheed Martin, over in Europe, Airbus. Some of these legacy aerospace companies, if you're doing somewhere, especially mid to high 20% range gross margin, that is pretty good. But Rocket Lab is headed higher than that, headed into the 30% range, even on a GAAP basis. Here's the Q2 outlook for GAAP gross margin. 30 to 32% is the expected range. That's pretty good. Now, the bottom line, they're still operating at a loss on an adjusted EBITDA basis, loss of 28 to 30 million expected. It's going to take some time for this company to scale up and actually be able to pay all of its bills without dipping into cash on the balance sheet. But things are headed in the right direction. And again, proof of concept for their vertically integrated business that includes lots of in-house component design. They have the 3D printing business, reusable rockets. This has all the makings of a business that really could continue to scale up and provide some fantastic shareholder returns eventually in the future.
Let's also take a look at their backlog and see how their revenue mix has changed and how they expect it to continue changing. In Q1 2024, space systems was the bigger portion of their backlog. Now, in Q1 2025, the ending backlog still the majority space systems, but launch getting a bigger share at 40%, a 60-40 split. And then customer mix at the end of Q1 2025, commercial gaining more ground, 54% versus 46% in government backlog. And here's another look at some KPIs that are provided by FinChat. We mentioned earlier that they've increased their launches in the last quarter. In Q1, they had 5 launches. Back in Q1 of 2024, 4 launches. And then there's that revenue value per launch. That's the blue line. You can see that's been staying steady at right around 7 million. And then the cost per launch, 5.7 million in this most recent quarter, brought down a little bit from last year.
All of that is great news for the gross margin profile of the business. But as we mentioned, ultimately, after you subtract all the operating costs, Rocket Lab is still burning through money. And those losses did get a bit steeper in Q1 2025 compared to really any other point in the last few years. Now, as a percentage of revenue, things do continue to gradually improve But do note here, one of the key risks you would want to pay attention to with Rocket Lab is you want to make sure that these numbers here are trending in the right direction. And this, of course, is one of the key drivers of balance sheet health. Rocket Lab's still in good position here. Nearly $430 million in cash and short-term investments on the books at the end of Q1, another $84 million in longer-term investments. And as you would expect from a company that's heavily stilted towards infrastructure and towards manufacturing, they do have some debt, around $424 million in debt, a little bit of that coming due this quarter, but making sure that those elevated expenses come down over time and that they properly manage their balance sheet is going to be something to keep an eye out for. So with that, Casey, is Rocket Lab a buy for us here at Chipstock Investor?
Well, with the market downturn, we bought a number of other things, and we just didn't have room to add this one yet. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, we did express interest when we did the initial deep dive a couple months ago, and I would say I'm definitely still interested, but I think we have time to be patient on this one and watch things progress. And if we were going to make a buy here sometime this year, it would be a very small starter position with the goal of hopefully adding more to it over time if the growth thesis for vertically integrated, commercially focused space economy stocks continues to play out.
Make sure you hit the subscribe button, like the video, share with your friends, and once again, check out Semiconductor Insider, link in the video description below. 25% off an annual membership until May 15th. See you all again soon at Chipstock Investor.